Bollywood to Hollywood with Rao Rampilla. Today we have a very special show with an artistic director from Medicine Show Theatre, Barbara Vann. Barbara, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
You know, I have been trying to explore this idea in my head. I read the book by Stella Adler. She wrote a book about Ibsen, Strindberg, and Chekhov. And she talks about actors doing just the technique rather being artists. For instance, she talks about the piano players, the European pianists. They play their hearts out. The American pianists, she complains, they play the technique. So she says being an artist is different from just being a technician, using just technique and doing the technique. So I have this thing in my head, well, I'm an actor, so how do I get to become an artist? So that's the thing I have been exploring. And I thought maybe perhaps you could help me more because you've been in this business for so long, 50, 60 years. And you have your own theater company, which is the Medicine Show Theatre, which is on 52nd Street between 10th and 11th Avenue. So you have seen a lot of people, you have touched a lot of people. So could you give me some
some pointers on how to become an artist rather than a technician?
Yeah.
I don't know. What came to mind very quickly are two things, one that I always thought was funny. There's an exercise when you're working on a song where you get an image for each word. And Mark Zeller, who was the teacher, said to one of the people who was singing, "Could you make your images a little less conventional?" And that's one place is where your mind is. If your mind is conventional, then you may become an artist, and that a lot of people will accept you, and you may get paid for it because their ideas are conventional too. And the other was that we did a play in the Open Theater. This was in the '60s, making fun of the movies of the time, the Rock Hudson, what's her name, Doris Day movies, called "It's Almost Like Being." There was a song called "It's Almost Like Being in Love," but the play was Jean-Claude Van Italé's play was "It's Almost Like Being," and the theater that tries to encapsulate a form of being is always false, because it's what it spends its time doing, and a lot of actors do this. I'm working now on a piece. What they spend their time doing is denying where they are in order to get where they think they ought to be.
Can you explain what is being?
Can I explain what is being? Well, I think the Buddhists do a lot of that. To be a good actor, you have to first be there, and second, talk, and as opposed to uttering phrases that sound good. I can't explain being. It means being open to everything that's around you and being present in the moment and
be really there.
Be really there,
yeah.
And then then the character tails along. I know we're talking a lot later, or we were going to about art and nature, and I've been reading a piece that I want to do some postmodern pastiching on called "The Decay of Lying" by Oscar Wilde, where he talks about the fact that you find more truth in lying than you do in nature, because nature is always viewed through the encapsulating perception of the person seeing it. You can't own nature. You can own your own nature, but you can't say, well, like these these aren't real.
But
took me a while.
Just to enlighten me, how could lying be real? I mean,
Because
truth.
it's a creative act.
Ah, okay.
Because it's a creative act that you take responsibility for.
Isn't all acting is lying? I think one time Alan Arkin told me.
Well,
about
I
it.
mean, it is to an extent it's lying. We have such a bad connotation on lying that I find myself, wanting, no, it's telling the truth. No, it's lying, or it's not lying. It's what I always say it is it's taking the part of somebody else, that you are taking the part of that person, and so it's an act of generosity where you're not condemning the person, but you're being the person, and or praising the person, but you are accepting that person as yourself, and that's a very generous act, I think.
So what about this Oscar Wilde?
Oh, what about this Oscar Wilde?
Lying.
Well, part of it is a joke. I mean, that's the whole thing, is when is it a joke and when is it real? Part of it's a joke, and part of it is saying that the artist creates a work of art and the rest of the world imitates it. So that's, nature imitating art. I don't think one can create a mountain and have the other mountains imitate it. And I'm really talking about, stuff I don't know that much. We should look at the pictures, because I do have something to say about, well, I'll babble now and you can edit it. I've always liked the art that was created in the 20s and the 30s, and then again when we started doing, there are things called anti-art. Art and anti-art. I don't know that it was anti-art, but it was a whole other way of looking at art in the 60s. And what they both had to do with was, certainly in the 20s and 30s when surrealism and Dada and all that came in, and then in the 60s when postmodernism and abstract expressionism came in, was the idea that the art reflecting the mores and the principles of the people who were running the world. I mean, this was after the First World War, where pretty much an entire population was wiped out. They said something's really wrong with society and the art of that society if it can lead to war like this. And we certainly felt the same way in the 60s when there was another senseless war brought about by the people who knew what was best for us. And, again, we were saying, if Doris Day can smile and say, gee, isn't it a wonderful world? And we knew that it was not a wonderful world at all, because our friends were being sent off to get shot for no reason. That the art that world created also had to be rejected because it was too false, too pretty, too, it said to establishment, I guess was the word that we used a lot.
Well, let's see some pictures. I took some pictures from the Museum of Modern Art in D.C. They relate to the Renaissance period. So let's see what you think of them, maybe in relation to acting or whatever reality of the life. Could we run the pictures? Yes. See, these are all Renaissance pictures, perfect. It has beauty, elegance, and they speak themselves. There's the characters, they speak out. So the artist, the painter there, he's an artist. The live expression, you don't see that much there in the modern art. It's quite different. The modern art is quite different, but you can see in the Napoleon and even the clock that there's a timing, and they say everything has its relevance. So
the Napoleon is one thing. If you didn't know that they were Renaissance. Especially the man with his arm up. I mean, they're quite expressionistic. They're quite, they're beautiful. At least they speak to me. It would be interesting to show them to someone who didn't recognize them as Renaissance paintings. It's interesting that they were in the Museum of Modern Art. I know that reading Aristophanes, which sometimes it seems like, wow, this is the most modern stuff that I've ever seen. There's always somebody who cuts through the structure of making the world run the way it ought to run. The power structure. I don't know.
Is there a relationship with those pictures? The painters, they do the layering and painted in layer by layer, and the acting, creating characters and telling the truth of the character, even if it is a lie. We were talking about this earlier, that you worked with an acting teacher who said you layer the character in emotion. Yeah, Austin Pendleton. He believes in layering the character.
And I worked with, she taught at our space, and I can't remember her name, very, very famous, and she said you can't layer, you have to have emotions right next to each other. You can feel this one moment and that another, and it sort of looks like it's, but people only have one feeling, one emotion, one perception at a time. Who knows? I'm sure it's different for different people, and it's probably, and this is something that we worked on in the Open Theater. In fact, Rao and I, we made a series of videotapes on these exercises that were originated in the 60s, which will soon be purchasable at Medicine Show. But in any case, the point, there was no way to perform dream plays. There was no way to perform Ionesco. There was no way to perform Arabal. There was no way to perform Beckett. You had to find a whole new way of acting to play these new kinds of people or these new kinds of situations. And these now the horror movies and everything, they're kind of like people trapped in a world they don't understand. But what this was creating a world that you were comfortable in, but was outside of what I like to call passing for normal, because we all know how to pass for normal. We all know, well, not everybody. Some people are locked up because they don't. But you know how to behave on the subway, and you know how to behave in a bank, and you know how to behave at work or wherever you are.
Can I interject?
Please.
In those paintings, when they painted the background, so that's like the world. The world you're talking about. So if the paintings are in that world, the pictures are in that background world, then it is there. So it is the same thing in acting, right?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And I guess then critics come in and say that's not true, or that's not real, or the background isn't this, or the background isn't that, or who likes it, or it's interesting to know what survives and what's good art and what's bad art. And
I was also told that some of these famous directors, before they became famous film directors, they studied art, the painting, how the picture is framed.
Oh, well, I think they should. I think that's a good idea. I didn't know that they did, but it makes perfect sense. I prefer live theater, but a certain kind of live theater where the individual has room to function as an individual and people function together, because for me that's the purpose of theater, is to show that people can function improvisationally, or to get more or less improvisationally together. And in film, which people tell me I should do, you look where the director or the editor, I'm not sure how, tells you to look. And as an audience member, I resent it because I want to see everything. Picasso. I don't know if it's cubism or what the term is for that kind of work, has a canvas without a perspective. In other words, you can look anywhere on the canvas that you want to first. You don't look at, Christ on the cross. That one was pretty clear where you were supposed to look. But you're free to make the journey of the canvas yourself. And
I mean, I have a lot more pictures, but I couldn't show it to them. The
no,
limitations
but
of time.
that's what I think is true. That's the kind of theater that interests me, where the audience is free. I mean, granted, it helps that everybody's saying the same thing, more or less, or not the same thing, but it relates to everybody, but they're free to look.
I remember when I was reading Stanislavski's autobiography, the book, when he was growing up, they used to put these famous paintings in the theater. I remember he mentioned about that paintings. Now I'm talking to you, it just came to my mind. Could we have the stone, the two stones cleavaged, and behind that there are Native American, and this is in another museum outside. And that I thought it is funny, out of nothing they created this little bird, and then out of these two stones, these are all, to me, great pieces of art, and then out of stone, they created this whole, and out of nothing, some bamboo sticks, they created art, beautiful, and this lady, probably out of clay, probably, and then this dragon. And then the Native American behind the dragon.
Are they found objects?
Well, it's
found materials or something?
I think they are before the galleries. They are for sale. It's exhibited.
No,
there.
I meant the stuff they made the sculptures out of.
It's probably clay out of.
Oh, but they didn't find them because they was a period. I haven't kept up with art, but there was a period where. They used to use a lot of junk, found objects to make art, and
see, that's fascinating to me.
Picasso said, I won an Obie once, and it was a funny, and Dustin Hoffman gave me the Obie, and I had known him 100 years ago when he was called Dusty, and but anyway, and when I accepted the Obie, I said, I was trying to be funny, that it seemed strange to me that I was getting it since I didn't remember ever getting a good review, which made the Village Voice very angry with me, but that's... And I quoted Picasso, who said, "Art is what the artist says it is." And Dustin said, "That girl is right." And then some feminist later on got very upset that he called me a girl. And since I was 50 at the time, I was very pleased. But in any case, that art is what the artist says it is. Critics are weird folks. Sibelius defined a critic, I think it's Sibelius, as someone who has failed in literature or the arts. And that's pretty much the case. And somebody said they've never built a statue to a critic, which isn't quite true. There's the Brooks Atkinson Theater. But other than that, Carmen got terrible reviews. Porgy and Bess got terrible reviews. Everything we love got terrible reviews. And poor Bizet died before he ever knew that thing was going to be everywhere. Art is what the artist says it is. Jackson Pollock, did he invent it, or was it... some Indian. I saw recently a film of some paintings on prehistoric stone walls that they just unearthed, and some of them look incredibly modern. Who sees what they see, and why? I don't know. I don't know that. I guess the hunt is to find, if you're in acting or theater, like-minded people, or else I guess you do one-person shows, and there are a lot of those around, and some of them are very good because they rent our theater from time to time. Or to find like-minded people to create art. My father used to say that acting was a disease, the theater was a disease.
Why?
I think probably because his father was in it, although I didn't know or something. But in a way it is. I pretended to be doing political science and philosophy until I got out of college because nobody wanted to hear me say anything about theater, although I worked with some people, who taught there, and not teachers, but guest artists, and they knew that I was one of those. And and my grandson is one of those.
I see.
And why? I don't know. To create something outside, because as an actor, although it is yourself, you are creating something outside yourself. And it is perhaps I was going to say the closest you get to nature, but that's silly.
You know what I thought after seeing those pictures? Because I'll always have these grandiose ideas of acting, whatever that I was trying to learn and I was taught.
And he's a playwright too. He's good. He's good.
And then what happened is, after I saw these pictures, if someone can create a beautiful art like that a chicken out of this little metal plates. So why can't in acting we can create something like that? Maybe the one that can create something like that would be an artist out of nothing. Maybe your theater.
Oh, that's what. Wait. That's what I was thinking of in the middle of the night preparing for this. Performance art, which is sort of a dead. Well, it may not be, and I may just not know anything about it. But again, in the 80s, performance art was sort of a combination of visual arts and acting, and then. Then people did naughty things like covering their bodies with chocolate and so on, and the National Endowment, cut then all the funding organizations cut. We used to get money for performance art, and then everybody cut those categories because people were doing outrageous or bad or some kind of thing. I mean, they weren't really. I mean, we were told we had wanted at one point to kill a chicken at the beginning of a performance and serve it up roasted at the end of the performance, and everybody was going, "Oh no, you can't do that. That's too horrible." And I'm like, "Well, excuse me, but don't you? This is what people do. This is reality. I mean, we didn't do it, and I don't know that anybody could have done it, but." They would go, "Oh, you can't do that," but they could eat chicken or beef or anything else. And we wound up painting the leaves of a plant with paint, different colors. And people were so shocked by that. I still have the plant. I mean, it washes right off. But as I say, performance art, which has the quality of visual arts and acting in it. It's an interesting form.
Well, my intuition, my reaction to those pictures was, well, so long you have what we call object in acting, of all the elements, so long you have a clear object or a basic major theme, then whatever you put it together, it becomes an artistic piece.
As long as to do that by going out on the stage and sort of standing there and nothing seemed to happen. And then the audience would start to laugh because it made them nervous. We always talk about the fact that most people are more afraid of speaking before a group than they are of almost anything else in life or death. And it's like, I feel in a way that the function of live theater is to let them know nothing that terrible. There's nothing that terrible about it. What's going to happen, to you, to anybody, to... just.
Now let's go to the nature. Can we run those pictures from the skies?
I can't do that.
See, somehow those pictures, it's so beautiful. I don't know if somebody believes in God, can artists paint those pictures?
I was saying
that
Jane Wilson can paint fabulous pictures of the sky, the advantage of having a painting of the sky.
All those beautiful.
Well, they're fabulous. They're gorgeous.
It just fascinated me, because especially living in New York City, not even seeing the skies.
Well, that's why apartments and houses with fabulous views rent for a lot of money if those people ever look out the window.
Looking at those, even the way the I don't call them mountains, but the mounds, the way they are sculptured.
Well, people like to go to Santa Fe to look at the scenery.
It's like in the Ten Commandments, like the sky is opening and the God is putting their hands into. It's so suddenly, it's all there.
I get tempted from time to time to drop everything and just stare at the sky. I don't know how long it would last, but it certainly cleans the palette of the mind.
All those beautiful colors, it's just. It's given. It's somebody poking their hand and looking through these clouds. And, it's like the pictures in Ten Commandments, yes. Grandiose pictures.
Well, it's also
as if you are seeing from the sky like Apollo, or.
Well, it's also like Leonardo's paintings of.
So what do you think of? Is there any connection between
to rate them?
Nature and the acting.
I guess it makes you feel small enough to know that it doesn't matter if you make a mistake. That nobody cares. Nobody's out to get you if you do. When they could make a tornado more easily.
Well, we'll continue this discussion. That's all for today. It's a beautiful topic. Given the limitations of half an hour, we can't go too far, but we will continue in another episode. So until next time, see you all. Bollywood to Hollywood with Rao Rampilla.